I knew something was off the moment Brent started showing up to meetings in those smug little sockless loafers. Like he was auditioning for a TED Talk no one invited him to. This was a man who once asked me, without irony, if the scheduler system could just be ported into a cloud spreadsheet. I didn't even blink. 14 years I'd spent building and refining the damn thing, a multi-threaded scheduler infrastructure that governed Halcyon's global product timing down to the minute. If APAC didn't launch on time, it wasn't marketing's fault. It wasn't the dev team's fault. It was mine. Except it never was. My framework didn't fail. Not once. But of course, success makes you invisible. Brent couldn't stand that. Couldn't stand that I wasn't loud, wasn't political, didn't campaign for credit. I just delivered. Over and over, on time, quietly. He'd call it legacy knowledge, always with that glassy smile that said obsolete even if the words didn't. He was the kind of guy who spoke in LinkedIn captions, synergy, streamlining, innovate forward, without ever understanding the plumbing underneath. And the CEO, new blood, young, tall, surgically grinned, spoke with his hands too much, like he was conducting an orchestra of buzzwords. First month on the job, he held an all-hands Zoom and said Halcyon's new frontier was about removing friction-laden dependency points. I remember sitting at my desk, sipping a reheated coffee from 7 a.m., thinking, that's me. I'm a friction-laden dependency point. By the way, while you're here, if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. You'd be amazed how many people tune in and never hit that button, and it really helps our small team keep these stories coming. Thanks. Now, I'm not dramatic. I don't storm into boardrooms. I don't write manifestos on Slack. My rebellion, if you could call it that, came in the form of one line of code wrapped in a license clause I'd written 9 years ago. Clause 9C. At the time, legal had skimmed past it. Most of them didn't understand half the stack I was referencing, and the other half figured I was just being thorough. What it really said, buried in the dry procedural language, was simple. If you terminated the licensed scheduler role without a full documented transition, every active queue halted, every product release froze, and the original architect, that's me, retained continuity rights for 90 business days. It was my insurance policy. Not because I was paranoid, but because I'd seen this before. The rise of modernization always comes cloaked in pastel slide decks and shallow competence. There's always a Brent. There's always a new CEO trying to make his mark. And there's always someone like me who remembers what happens when the scaffolding is yanked without checking if the building underneath is load-bearing. For a long time, I didn't need to think about Clause 9C. I was trusted, left alone. I had a window view in a corner of the operations wing that no one visited unless something broke. My hours were strange. My desk always had a second monitor filled with terminal logs, and most people in the company weren't entirely sure what I did. They just knew things stayed stable when I was around. Then Brent got promoted. Suddenly, I was being copied on weird memos about sunsetting legacy infrastructure and migrating to turnkey cloud alternatives. He started asking the dev team to map out the system as if it hadn't been thoroughly documented, by me, annually. Once, he even asked if someone could make a Figma flowchart of the scheduler. I laughed so hard I almost choked on my pretzels. But what really made my skin go cold was the meeting invite titled Restructure Review, Back-End Optimization. No one invited me, but I wasn't stupid. I saw who was on it. The CEO, Brent. A few people from legal who'd never stepped foot in the operations wing. That's when I took my leather folder out of the cabinet. Printed copies of Clause 9C, signed and dated a simple message, folded it into the front pocket and left it on the edge of my desk like an afterthought. Then I waited. Friday, 4:02 p.m., I got the call. Brent didn't even have the decency to call me by name in those meetings. I was just the legacy scheduler operator, or the back-end custodian. Like I was some crypt keeper hunched over obsolete scripts, held together by chewing gum and PTSD. Never mind that my framework had powered 5 international product zones with a 99.99% uptime record, since he was probably still playing beer pong in a frat basement. He didn't get it. Worse, he didn't care to. He stood at the head of the executive table like he was pitching a startup to a bunch of hungover VCs. We can modernize scheduling, he declared, flipping to a slide deck someone half his age had clearly made. Look at this. AI load balancing, containerized ops, plug-and-play APIs. It all sounded sleek, sure, if you didn't know the bones of the system it was trying to replace. This guy's been duct taping the back end for a decade. I almost laughed. Duct tape? What I'd built was elegant, redundant, resilient. Brent just didn't know how to read the logs. The CEO nodded along, tapping his pen like he was trying to seem decisive. The guy had been in the seat less than 2 months and had already made optimization his favorite word. Of course he liked Brent. Brent looked like him, sounded like him, and promised disruption without understanding what was actually being disrupted. I raised my hand. Calm. Controlled. I authored the framework, I said. It's proprietary. The license is tied to me personally through my LLC. Any transition of scheduler control requires a formal sign-off from the license holder. That's me. Brent barely blinked. We've already mapped it all out. I kept my eyes on the CEO. Clause 9C, I said. It's not optional. Clause what? He replied, looking genuinely puzzled. He turned to legal like a student caught without homework. They looked equally lost. One of them jotted something down, probably to Google later. Maybe they'd find the internal documentation I submitted 9 years ago, or the amendments I logged 2 years back. But none of them had read it, because why would they? I wasn't noisy, I wasn't political, I just worked. And so they forgot I was dangerous. Brent waved a hand. We're fine. The architecture is mapped. The team's ready. It's a formality. A formality. That was the moment I knew he was going to try it. He thought all he had to do was unplug me and replug someone else in. He didn't understand that the system wasn't just code. It was ritual, sequence, permission. I didn't argue. I didn't defend. I just nodded and said, all right. They thought silence meant surrender. It didn't. It meant I was letting them walk into the trap they'd built themselves. Over the weekend, I ran a quiet ping on the continuity tracker, still intact. My name still locked to the license, my authority untouched. The redundancy fallback timer set. The breach alert ready. All I had to do was nothing. Friday, 4:02 p.m. sharp. The air outside my office went quiet. Too quiet. No keyboard clicks, no Slack pings, just the soft hum of a copier and that heavy stillness that means someone's about to pull a trigger. Then the door opened. Linda from HR appeared, all awkward smiles and legalese posture. The CEO would like to speak with you in the side conference room. No agenda, no call ahead. Just that sentence and a one-way hallway. I walked in. Small room. Frosted glass, one sad little ficus in the corner like it was paid to witness my firing. The CEO was already seated, elbows on the table, hands folded like a pastor about to break bad news to a widow. He didn't look up until I sat across from him. I'll get to the point, he said, eyes flicking to the door. Your directors convinced me you're not essential anymore. We're restructuring. I blinked once. No surprise, I'd already read the map. Brent had been laying the breadcrumbs all quarter, shifting projects, locking me out of sprint meetings I'd created, whispering things like, we're building a more agile model to stakeholders who didn't even know what the scheduler was. This was the part where they cut the rope and watched the balloon float away, clueless that the rope was holding them to the ground in the first place. The CEO continued. HR will walk you out in under an hour. You'll get a severance packet. IT will disable access by close of business. I nodded. No reaction, just the faint sound of my pulse, steady and slow, like a train waiting for its signal. Do you need time to pack up? He asked, like this wasn't premeditated. No, I said. I travel light. I stood, left the reports on my desk untouched, didn't wipe a drive, didn't delete a key. I didn't need to. The system was already doing its job. Clause 9C was quietly ticking in the background, a dormant tripwire wrapped in compliance language no one had the patience to interpret. I picked up my old leather folder, worn, scuffed, and a little dusty, and tucked it under my arm like a formality. Linda met me in the hallway. She gave me a sad little look, like I was a teacher retiring mid-semester. We didn't speak. I walked past the break room where someone had left half a sheet cake that said Q4 push in blue frosting. Past the engineers who still hadn't realized their Q testing depended on credentials now expired. By 4:57 p.m., my login blinked out. I drove home with the windows down. Ohio air still too humid for October. The dog greeted me like nothing had happened, like the world was still in one piece. I fed her, kicked off my shoes, and sat on the porch with a lukewarm beer I didn't finish. My phone stayed dark. Not even a courtesy follow-up from HR. Perfect. Then, at 2:47 a.m., a jolt. Phone vibrating like a dying insect. 10 missed calls. Then 20. Then 30. Slack pings from engineers. A voicemail from the CTO, his voice cracked. Said something about emergency access and license issues. My favorite? A desperate text from Brent, time-stamped 2:41 a.m. Can you hop on a quick call? We're having a weird scheduler issue. Weird? Sure. I silenced the phone, rolled over, let the system burn exactly as designed. Monday, 9 a.m. on the dot, when Halcyon's Asia-Pacific product release was supposed to ping live across 6 markets, nothing happened, no push notifications, no auto-generated emails, no distribution triggers. Just dead air and an error message. Scheduler process invalid, queue unresolved. They waited 6 minutes, rebooted, waited 10 more. That's when the calls started. By 9:17 a.m., EMEA was supposed to launch. It didn't. North America followed suit like a domino swan dive into a swimming pool with no water. 3 global zones, all frozen mid-cycle. 3 high-level stakeholders screaming into their respective voids. By 9:30, the dev team was in full triage mode. Engineers tearing through the log layers like there was some magical typo that would fix a license lock. It wasn't a bug. It wasn't even a system crash. It was a wall. A wall they'd never bothered to check was there. One of the junior engineers, bless his sleep-deprived heart, tried to override the fail-safes with admin credentials. That's when they discovered the lock was hard-coded, license-bound, irreversible without a release key. They tried a restore. The system rejected it. Tried a rollback. Nothing. Then someone thought to call legal. Brent, already sweating through his blazer, told IT to just reset the damn framework. His voice cracked halfway through framework. He was still under the impression this was just a hiccup, a Monday morning bug. But when legal replied to the chain with 3 words, license is non-transferable, that's when the panic really began. Clause 9C didn't blink. It didn't care. It just triggered. Because the scheduler wasn't broken. It was doing exactly what it was built to do, shut down when misused. And it had detected misuse the moment my credentials were removed without formal transition. Every process request bounced back with a red highlight in the queue. Originator release not present. License invalid per 9C. They had no override, no legal workaround, no continuity clearance, no fallback. By noon, Brent was calling emergency meetings like water could put out a software fire. He tried pinging me again. I didn't answer. He called one of the staff engineers, someone I'd trained, someone who knew better, and begged for access notes, logs, anything. But the team was locked out. Not just from the framework, but from the documentation they'd arrogantly considered legacy and archived without understanding. The dread didn't come all at once. It came in increments. First, it was the marketing heads noticing their deliverables were frozen. Then the client success team realizing their promised features weren't shipping. Then legal, combing through the licensing agreements like archaeologists unearthing a curse, and buried deep in that clause, printed in plain English. Release queues are non-operational absent license holder continuity or originator override. I was the license holder. There was no override, and they'd walked right into it with open arms. By 8:22 a.m., Monday had already unraveled into a half-dozen back-to-back emergency huddles, and the CIO was on the phone with legal trying not to sound like he was begging. Can we just assign someone else permissions, migrate the access credentials? There's got to be a workaround. Legal paused, then replied in that clinical, unbothered tone they save for when the mess was entirely avoidable. Only with a documented transition and a signed release from the original architect. Clause 9C is explicit. Silence. I wasn't the original architect in some abstract way. I was the named license holder, and my LLC owned the runtime core. No clean handoff, no system. Brent didn't even sit down. He stormed back to my old office like he expected to find a secret switch under my keyboard. The room was exactly as I left it. Neat, Impersonal, humming with ghosts. The monitors had been logged out. My drawers were open. Nothing was missing. Not even the backup flash drive taped under my desk. Not even the post-its with old timestamps and variable tests. I had deleted nothing. Taken nothing. Everything was where it should be, except me. He checked the filing cabinet, pulled open folders, yanked books off the shelf like maybe I'd left some breadcrumb behind that would give him control. What he found instead was the old leather folder, the one I'd left sitting square in the center of the desk like a tombstone. Inside was a single printed sheet, high resolution, crisp font, full legal format, Clause 9C, underlined in red. Stapled behind it, a memo on my personal LLC letterhead. You won't need me until you do. Signed. Dated 2 months before I was let go. Notarized. The HR rep standing nearby saw the color drain from Brent's face. He held the folder like it was a landmine. For once, the man didn't speak in hashtags and jargon. He just stood there, blinking. The note wasn't bitter. There was no "I told you so," just inevitability. Meanwhile, across the company, engineers were poking at the scheduler shell like it was some alien spacecraft. They could see it. They could query the logs, but they couldn't touch the actual queue triggers. Every override attempt returned the same message. License invalid. Originator action required. It was the first time most of them realized I hadn't just maintained the system. I'd built it, owned it, protected it, and they'd let me walk out the door because Brent thought a slide deck and swagger were enough to replace engineering literacy and long-term memory. By the time the executive team regrouped, the CIO was already fuming. We can't move forward. We need her release key. Brent tried to spin it. We can rebuild the system. Not in 11 days you can't, snapped the CTO. Someone passed the folder to the CEO. He stared at the note for a long time, said nothing. And still, I said nothing. I'd already spoken. 2 months ago. The boardroom was unusually quiet that Tuesday morning. No coffee chatter, no polite chuckles over someone's toddler photo, just the rustle of suit fabric and the collective hum of realization settling over the table like a winter frost. Legal entered without fanfare, a thick binder tucked under one arm, and laid it in front of the CEO with an almost ceremonial weight. No preamble, no warnings, just a quiet, "We found it." Inside, the original contract for the scheduler framework, the licensing terms, amendment logs, and finally, stapled to the inside back cover, Clause A 9C, printed in bold, full page with 3 signatures, mine, Legal's, and Halcyon's former CTO, who'd retired 3 years ago. A relic, maybe, but still binding. The CEO read it once, then again, slower. Termination of licensed scheduler role without approved transition invalidates active release queues. License holder retains continuity rights for 90 business days unless override approved by originator. He looked up. Who's the originator? Legal didn't blink. She is. I could imagine the silence that followed, the air sucked out of the room by a single sentence. I am the originator. There was no override because no one had asked. No one had listened. No one had bothered. The CEO flipped to the legal summary, eyes scanning faster now, mouth slightly open like he wanted to interrupt the words on the page. And we can't just transfer the license? No, legal replied, stone-faced. It's tied to a personal LLC. The contract stipulates non-transferable ownership without express written release. Brent, slouched halfway down the table with a sheen of flop sweat clinging to his temples, spoke for the first time in 10 minutes. Okay, but she's not trying to hurt us, right? I mean, we can just reach out and... She's under no obligation to respond, legal said, flipping another page. And the system isn't locked out. It's functioning exactly as designed. It's just not executing new queues. Because we terminated her, the CIO said flatly, piecing it together in real time. Without transition, legal confirmed, which invalidated the release queues. The next product cycle was set to roll in 11 days. 11 days of marketing push, 11 days of customer pre-orders, 11 days of mounting tension for every division dependent on those time-locked triggers, and they had no access. No key, no right to rebuild it, because the key wasn't digital, it was legal. The CEO leaned back, eyes unfocused. What are our options? None. came the answer, as cold as steel. The license didn't belong to Halcyon. It belonged to my name, my LLC. And unless I granted a formal override, every attempt to reboot, rebuild, or even emulate the core functions of that framework would trigger breach clauses that opened Halcyon to liability, client side, vendor side, and internally. That's when the full weight of it hit them. They hadn't just fired an employee, they'd amputated the nerve center without checking where the pain would land. The weapon wasn't the code, it was the clause, and they'd signed every line of it. Brent's first message came in at 3:12 a.m. Sunday morning, 4 days post-failure, 3 days into a mounting PR disaster, and 12 hours after legal confirmed they were completely, irrevocably screwed. "Hey, can we talk? Just want to clear a few things up." No pressure, just open convo. No punctuation, no subject line, just the digital equivalent of someone knocking on a locked door and pretending they didn't help weld it shut. I ignored it. At 7:18 a.m., he tried again. "We're hoping to reestablish a bridge with your framework, just for transition continuity. Totally cooperative, of course." Then came the emails. Longer, thirstier, laced with half-hearted flattery and way too many buzzwords. "Your contributions have been deeply valued. A collaborative restoration path could be mutually beneficial." I could practically hear him sweating through his keyboard. I didn't answer, not because I was angry. I just didn't need to. The scheduler system wasn't some vengeful ghost, it was just following its instructions, line by line. They'd severed the author, and the system responded accordingly. Silence begets silence. But outside Halcyon, the world was buzzing. Someone noticed Caruth Analytics had quietly launched a new multi-zone scheduling platform, one eerily similar in architecture and performance to Halcyon's now crippled one. Identical, really, almost like it had been written by the same person. Their homepage updated Saturday evening. Big banner, white background, clean font. Now scheduling global multi-zone product launches with 99.98% uptime. No names, no logos. But the tech crowd noticed. Engineers talk, systems whisper, patterns get recognized. And the kicker? Caruth hadn't tried to hide it. They'd been one of the firms Halcyon tried to poach clients from the previous quarter. Now they were doing more than surviving. They were eating Halcyon's lunch, and the market knew it. Internally, things started to unravel. The engineers, the ones Brent sidelined, the ones who used to sit 2 doors down from me, began submitting resignation notices. Not loud or messy, just quiet exits, one by one, because they knew what was coming. You can't swap the engine out of a moving car and expect it to keep coasting. Somewhere deep inside Halcyon, people began referring to the scheduler freeze as the quiet lockout. And even though my name was never officially mentioned, everyone understood who held the keys. No blog post, no angry tweet, no revenge email, just absence. But sometimes silence is the loudest room in the building. At exactly 5:57 p.m., the emergency board call went live, cameras off, mics muted, faces illuminated by monitors and shame. They'd tried to keep it quiet, send a few clarification emails to partners, dial up an outsourced DevOps crew from Singapore to simulate legacy architecture, even draft a social post that started with, "due to unforeseen maintenance." But the truth had outpaced their PR spin, and now they had 7 days left before the next global cycle. 7 days to either fix the unfixable or watch Halcyon's international credibility fold like cheap lawn furniture. The general counsel, looking like she hadn't slept since Thursday, shared her screen. Slide 1 appeared with a cold, unforgiving timestamp. Clause 9C breach timer, 7 days remaining. A tiny clock in the corner ticked down, second by second. Slide 2 dropped like a floorboard. Caruth offer sheet, mirrored architecture detected attached beneath it. A side-by-side comparison of Caruth's new launch platform and Halcyon's legacy scheduler. Routing logic, delay buffers, load balancing triggers, all eerily familiar. No copy-paste, just authorship. Slide 3. Client survey, 64% considering switch due to outage. The pie chart said more than words ever could. Halcyon had promised flawless global integration. Clients had built campaigns, hired influencers, sunk 6-figure pre-launch budgets around that promise. And now they were scrambling, because someone thought silence meant disposable. Then came the final slide, the one that changed everything. Reacquisition options. None. License contract is irrevocable, bold, underlined. Followed by the clause excerpt and the final nail. No sublicensing or reacquisition permitted post-termination absent written consent of originator. And I hadn't consented. I hadn't even responded. The CEO leaned back, lips parted slightly like he wanted to speak, but the words got stuck somewhere behind his molars. He turned slowly toward Brent, who stared at the screen like it might blink and show something different. Nobody said a word. There was nothing left to say. The silence wasn't just uncomfortable now. It was institutional, because the legal team couldn't fix it. The engineers couldn't bypass it. The board couldn't buy their way around it. They'd tried to erase me from the picture. Thought I was the past. Legacy overhead. A quiet woman who liked her uptime logs more than happy hours. But I hadn't just built the system. I'd written the rules they ignored. And they were learning, line by line, that I'd built the future while they were too busy looking over my shoulder. Carruth made the announcement on a Tuesday. No fanfare, no press release cluttered with adjectives or visionary mission statements. Just a quiet update to their leadership page. Executive Director of Systems Integrity. Eleanor Ellis Small headshot. Simple layout. No quote beneath it. That was enough. The same morning, Halcyon's internal systems team quietly published a retirement notice for the global scheduler framework. Buried in the tech wiki, 2 clicks past the firewall under a slug labeled Legacy Documentation. The system I'd built, the one they'd claimed was obsolete, was finally being acknowledged as irreplaceable. Right before it was scrapped, not because it failed, but because they'd broken the trust that powered it. The clients saw the writing on the wall before Halcyon's leadership did. Orders slowed, scheduled launches missed recovery windows. A few of the big partners reached out to Carruth directly. I wasn't in the room for those calls, but I didn't need to be. Word travels fast when one company bleeds and another offers a transfusion. By Friday, Brent was gone. The resignation came through as a brief internal memo filled with nothing words like new opportunities and personal growth. He'd packed his office before noon, never once looking the engineers in the eye. One of them told me later he left behind a whiteboard that still read, "Redesign targets, week 3, replace Ellis logic." The CEO followed 3 days later. Family reasons, the statement said. No one believed it. Everyone nodded. Clause 9C, once a buried contract footnote, got a new name around legal. The Ellis guillotine. It became a parable. A warning, a training slide. You don't cut loose the architect and assume the house will rebuild itself. And me? I never posted online, never subtweeted, never gloated. I didn't need to. The system spoke for me, not out of malice, not revenge, just structure, precision, the kind of cold logic that doesn't care about titles, politics, or pitch decks. I didn't sabotage anything. I didn't hack a single file. I followed the same protocols I always had. Documented, legal, fair. The only difference was, this time, they ignored them. Turns out, you don't have to raise your voice when your silence is already echoing in every boardroom, and you don't have to stay behind to watch them fall. You just have to know exactly where the ground gives out and leave.